where we today we're going to be talking about something near and dear to my heart, which is a project that I helped work on, which is our UCAN meat processing case studies. And Kathy just put in the chat that it just got published online, so that's very exciting. And yeah, sorry, I'm just getting out of my.
You want me? I can jump in with a couple housekeeping notes while I let folks in.
Sorry, I'm trying to pull things up still.
Yes, and Eliza is she is in the beginning of her vet med rotation. She is a graduate research assistant with Minnesota Farmers Union and the Regional Sustainable Development Partnerships, and is very generous with her time during a busy time for education. But I'm, for folks who don't know, I'm Stu Laurie. I do government relations for Minnesota Farmers Union, where I have the opportunity to work on a lot of meat processing issues. And before we get rolling here, as we get rolling, I just wanted to share a couple brief housekeeping notes. First, we're going to be hearing, as Eliza said, from the University COVID Action Network volunteers who underwent a study they're going to tell us about with small and mid-sized meat processors across the Midwest. We'll hear a presentation from them, and then hopefully there'll be some time for questions. One commitment that we will make is ending by 12:50. So we'll plan to wrap up then in case folks are on their lunch break. This meeting is being recorded, so keep that in mind with your questions or anything that you want to share. We'll post that to our YouTube channel at Farmers Union in case you have friends or colleagues who would hope to make it but couldn't join us today. And I and my friends here at Farmers Union are going to keep folks muted if we're getting feedback on your line. So don't be offended if we do mute you. And if you are on the phone to get back unmuted to ask a question, it's just *6. You're also welcome to throw questions, thoughts, comments in the chat throughout the presentation. So with that, Eliza, do you have anything to add? Otherwise, I know Kathy had some words of introduction to the effort too.
Yeah, go ahead, Kathy.
All right. Hi, all. I'm Kathy Draeger, and I'm the statewide director of the UMN Regional Sustainable Development Partnership. And we are very happy to work with Stu, who is helping with the meat processing subcommittee of the Local Foods Resiliency Network. And a big shout out to, I see a lot of faces that are involved with that as well. I think some of our nonprofit and other community members really stepped up when COVID hit. And this is one of the results. The regional partnerships were getting calls about meat processing, as I'm sure a lot of you had come across your desks and emails and phones as well. And we put in an application pretty soon, after this group started meeting, to the University COVID Action Network. I don't know if Dr. Katie Pelican is on, but we were grateful that they broadcast this project, and we were able to bring on some really stellar people. Joan Busch, who is a graduate of the Food Systems program at the University of Minnesota. Joan provided some overall project management, and we're just very grateful that Joan raised her hand as one of the volunteers on this project. Christopher Danner, who has just graduated, congratulations, Chris, from the Carlson School with his degree in supply chain and operation management and food systems. So Christopher was instrumental in helping us formulate this project and started out as a volunteer, but I very much appreciated his initiative. He applied for an undergraduate research opportunities program, which was actually able to help support some of his time. It's an excellent program to help undergraduates address research questions. And then we had Natalie Barka join us, and Natalie is getting a degree in food systems with a minor in food and agricultural business management. I don't know if I saw Natalie join us or not, but I just wanted to give a big shout out to the team that really worked on this. And Then there was a few of us at the U that also helped co-author this, Greg Schweser, Wayne Martin, and myself. So we're just grateful that we were able to do kind of a deep dive into 8 different meat processing systems in the upper Midwest to kind of look at what are the challenges, but really look at the successes. And that is what we focused on, some models that seem to be working. So with that, I can stop talking and turn it over to Chris, and thank you all for joining.
Thank you, Dr. Draeger. Can everyone hear me okay? Excellent. And then let's see here. Stu, I believe, are you getting the slides up for us there? Okay. While Stu is working on that, I'll build a little bit on what Dr. Draeger said. I know we've got a lot of folks in this call today who are very familiar with the power that local agriculture and locally raised meats have to power our economies and a stronger food system here in the state of Minnesota. And so I share her excitement to get the chance to dive into this situation that I think is very well known to many people in this call. Of the need for a strong, for that infrastructure to support our local farmers and have sufficient capacity when it comes to slaughter and processing of locally raised meats. So again, this title slide just introduces the project a little bit. And as Dr. Draeger shared, we have gone ahead and published these case studies in the U of M's Digital Conservancy. So we're excited that these will live on and hopefully inform future conversations both at the University of Minnesota as well as in other pathways of influence on this issue. And Stu, we can go to the next slide. So want to just give a little bit of background first off of where we were coming from. Dr. Draeger gave some of that kind of framing the situation already. We have known for years now, and I think many folks in this call have known that we need to make sure as a state that we are supporting this infrastructure for our farmers. And COVID-19 was certainly something that drew a lot of attention to that. When we saw both some supply disruptions, especially with some of the larger meat processing facilities in our state, which created some interesting supply changes and demand changes that some of our meat processors had to deal with. And then on the flip side, we also saw some sharp increases in consumer demand. Many consumers were at home and just became more interested in the food that they were putting on their families' tables. For other consumers, it might have been going to a local grocery store and seeing their meat counter a little emptier than they are normally used to and exploring some alternative options for feeding their families. But either way, we saw through a number of those factors, COVID-19 exacerbating the situation of a need for more capacity in that system for processing and slaughtering locally raised meats. When we did some additional background research, we saw that based on one of the most recent studies we could find, we've got about 280 meat processing facilities in Minnesota right now. And that's the number of meat processing facilities that employ under 500 people. So that was kind of the category we were looking at for smaller and medium-sized facilities. And we noticed in our background research some alarming factors that have come up in previous studies, such as the fact that nearly 2/3 of operators of these facilities are expecting to retire in the near future. And many of them do not have a transition plan in place for their business. And so as we've seen with ongoing situations in recent years with individual facilities, if they can't find someone to take it over, or perhaps if the facility itself is getting older and it's hard to justify maybe expensive improvements to modernize it, we can see those the situations for those facilities become precarious as well. And so when we combine all of those limitations that we see within this system, we know that that puts limits on an individual growth for an individual farmer, perhaps if they're having to pay more for processing than they had hoped, and that's causing them to have to go to a market with a higher price, but it can limit the economic growth of regions as well. And there's some research at the USDA kind of underlining how important locally raised foods are. Certainly across Minnesota, we know locally raised foods contribute over $139 million annually in economic value to our state, and meat is certainly a large part of that. So making sure that we have the right support for that is going to be essential for our state's agriculture moving forward. We can go to the next slide. Perfect. And so our project came together as Dr. Draeger said, sort of at the organizing of this meat processing working group and some of the organizations that you're seeing on this screen. We are blessed with a number of amazing individuals who have worked with our team and given us time, resources, answered emails, and we are so thankful to all of them. So I say that to say that what you're seeing on the screen, we had so many great supporters of this project that we couldn't fit them all in one PowerPoint slide. And we did want to make sure, in addition to what's on the slide, we also said a thank you to Minnesota State Cattlemen's Association, as well as United Food and Commercial Workers. It's exciting to see such a cross-industry sector of individuals and representatives coming together around this very important issue. As Dr. Draeger said, our project and us as volunteers were commissioned for this specific issue, but we know that there are people working within these organizations each day to continue what we have already worked on, as well as take some of what we've learned from this research project and bring it into positions where we can hopefully make a difference moving forward. We can go to the next slide. So what you're seeing on this slide are some broader goals for both our working group, as well as some of the goals that we were addressing by bringing this research forward. Of course, a lot of these goals are going to be beyond the scope of what we could do in a shorter term research project. But overall, the information that we gathered through the case studies and through this research report, we hope to use that to contribute towards these goals at a legislative level, at an academic level through further research and investigation, and as well as perhaps informing the efforts of other colleges and universities and other private businesses as well. So first and foremost, we are looking for ways to increase the number of slaughter and processing plants here in Minnesota. And that can be through, it sounds like there's a variety of work going on in terms of some public-private partnerships, that ideas are being explored there, and other ways to do that. But so part of what we were looking at through these case studies is what types of business models are working right now, or what are some of the challenges with those business models, so that we can better inform that increase and that further investment in the future. The second one, and I would say almost equally as important, is how can we help support existing plants? And we say that not just through their physical footprint, but by helping address a variety of issues, such as labor, the need for additional capital so that they can expand and purchase new equipment, as well as other sort of value-added opportunities to help them improve things like packaging and marketing. Many of us in this call might be familiar that we've got multiple levels of inspection that a meat processing facility can undergo, and that therefore determines how farmers can sell the meat that has been processed at that plant. So one factor we were looking at is what is stopping some of the custom exempt, which is kind of that lower tier of inspection, most restricted in terms of sales. What is stopping some of those plants from moving to a higher level, such as state inspected or USDA inspected, and perhaps opening some doors for the farmers that they serve? And then last but not least, again, addressing labor very directly, knowing that it's a very timely issue for our state in a lot of sectors right now. What could we be doing through some programs to help address that? So you can move to the next slide, please. So again, we are a group of not just University of Minnesota students, but also alum, and then more broadly through the working group, a number of individuals coming from across the industry and from across our university to take a look at this issue and really do a deep dive into what is working and what is challenging right now for our existing processors. It was 8 case studies that ended up being conducted. We chose processors from across our region, and we'll go into that in just a little bit. And again, looking at factors such as ownership models, needs for funding in terms of operational as well as capital funding. So what can we do? What is needed to help bring these plants into the next generation of their operations? And then finally, what is challenging just on that day-to-day level? So looking not just strategically, but also in the moments, what, especially with COVID-19, has really been challenging for some of these operators in these plants and for their businesses. And so we can move to the next slide. So based on these objectives, we came up with sort of 3 core research questions. We developed an interview protocol that was reviewed by our working group and incorporated a lot of different factors that we've talked about a little bit through the background that we presented. The first question was, again, looking at what are just the core challenges and opportunities associated with operating a processing facility in our region. We know that surveys have been conducted in the past. There's been a lot of really great research around this, especially at the national level. But what we wanted was a really, really deep dive, getting that one-on-one interview in with the processor, either a manager or owner of a smaller facility, to really try to understand through their eyes what is challenging and what are they looking at for the future right now, especially with all of the changes that we've seen in the last couple of years, and with COVID-19 more recently as well. The second question then was kind of taking that question to the next level and asking what programs could be introduced potentially in the future that might help improve the outlook for some of these processing businesses. We asked explicitly and got a lot of great feedback, both positive and constructive, around how organizations like the Department of Agriculture and other grant makers can improve their processes in the future so that the funds that they're distributing are timely, are addressing important needs for businesses, and also understanding where some of the gaps where maybe additional funding could be appropriated in the future. And then lastly, taking a look more on the private side and thinking about some of the entrepreneurs out there who we've interacted with and who are looking to get into this business. What should they know if they're looking to start a new facility in the future? And how could we support them as they're working through that journey, from ideation to all the way to groundbreaking and opening a new facility. Again, we want to support the ones that are existing, and that is obviously very important work, but we also know that it is going to take some growth and expansion in this industry in the future to make sure that we've got the modernized infrastructure that we need moving forward. And Stu, we can go to the next slide. And I'm going to turn it over now to Joan to talk a little bit about the organizations that we worked with on each of these case studies.
Thanks, Christopher. Yeah, I'm just going to give a very brief synopsis on each one of them. And, we were just trying to gather information overall as to what they were doing and how they were doing, amidst COVID, and what their, forward thinking was with regards to their own businesses. And I'm going to start with Rural Advantage, because they're kind of the outlier in this group of people, because they are a nonprofit. And so they have different dictates with which they are working with. They have a vision for capitalizing on the interconnections between agriculture, the environment, and communities. Rural Advantage operates a 120-acre farm near Leroy, Minnesota, where they intercrop chickens with hazelnut trees. And out of a need to process those chickens, they were able to purchase a plant in Stacyville, Iowa. And the neat thing about that was that they, since it was just recently closed, basically everything was in place for them, and they just needed to clean up the facility and the equipment and do a little minor touch-up repairs so that would be up and running. And I believe that should be up and running this spring, 2021. And they are also working with a group called Regeneration Farms that has a larger connection with this intercropping of chickens with third-tier crops rather than just conventional growing of chickens. So they will be utilizing that facility even more so than Rural Advantage, but it will be Rural Advantage facility. The next group we worked with and talked to was Byron Center Meats. They're located in Byron Center, Michigan. They're a pretty big outfit as far as we could tell. And the neat thing with them is they recently added mobile slaughter to their business model. The idea for them on that was a request from many farmers that wanted to expand businesses and to serve a greater need in their communities. but they were also limited by having a lack of access to getting their chickens and cattle to a USDA processing facility. So Byron Center Meats went and started, their own mobile slaughter units that are just definitely helping improve that economy in Michigan. Also, a lot of farmers want to be able to have less stress to their animals, and when they're processed on site, that definitely does reduce that stress for the animals. Then we have Clean Chickens and Company, and they are exclusively a mobile processor for poultry. And they serve a broad range of farmers. And as a result of their growth, they were an LLC and recently have become an S Corp. The other thing that Greg, the owner, is doing is they're applying for licenses to broaden their scope into Wisconsin and Iowa, and hopefully are doing that by mid-summer of 2021. He also hopes to do franchising of his mobile units so that the growth can continue, but he can also have other people on board as owner operators, and sharing the responsibility of the Clean Chicken and Company. And and that will give more access to smaller producers, people that are doing like backyard chickens and things like that, where for them it's cost prohibitive to go to a larger processor. And also with that franchising, he wants to do a apprenticeship program so people are well versed at what they are doing in processing of chickens, especially when they're doing it all on site and under the guise of the USDA regulations. Next, we have Dover Meats, and Eric Klein, the owner, had run a distribution company for about 20 years, servicing many small processors. And what he found is that, he ran into many issues like lack of space, high volume that he was doing, and meeting customer demands. That prompted him and his wife to build and open up their own plant, and that was open in 2017. And now that is up and running, they are able to meet market demand and provide a quality product to their customers. They are 100% USDA inspected, thus they require the animals to be brought to the facility alive and viable. The lack of facilities during COVID has kept them more than busy, and they have thought about adding a second shift to their business model, but are really still weighing whether that's going to be overall a profitable thing for them, because there is a lot of cost involved with doing a second shift, hiring more managers, more staff, and also having to pay for an inspector to be on site for another 8 hours a day. The next people on this list is Gunther Farms. They're located in LaGrange, Indiana, and they are known for their on-farm USDA inspected processing plant. They do specialize in quality meats that a big part of their customer base was higher end restaurants in the Chicago area. But even with closures, they've done very well. They found different ways to market their product, and so they weren't adversely affected by COVID. The limiting factor for them at this point in time is adding a manager, which for them, base cost is $50,000 just for the manager. And as Evan told us, he's like, they're right at that precipice because it's not just the cost of the manager, it's the cost of more labor and adding more machinery. So they feel that at this point in time, it wouldn't be economically lucrative for them to do that. And overall, that's not the end game. They want to keep their high quality hogs and poultry business where it's at. Now we have J.M. Watkins in Plum City, Wisconsin. In November 2013, Brandon Clare and his wife purchased this long-standing business, and they have just continued to grow, but they're at a point where they can't grow. And so Brandon shared that he is investing the business's capital and is building a multi-million-dollar expansion, new building for them. He goes, this is exciting but scary. The new facility for J.M. Watkins would double its current capacity. So he'll have to double his staff, but he's forward thinking in what he's doing with that, and is hoping to grow the retail storefront, which he's putting in the new facility, and also has a lot of clients and customers that are around the country through direct marketing. And he's also, in doing this, is looking, to have the design be transferable down the road, but also kind of wanting to make sure that the animals that he's processing, the pre-slaughter holding area is conducive to keeping the animals calm before they are slaughtered and reducing that stress load also. And, his idea was that he wants it to be attractive so that when he does retire, it can be transferred to someone else or be used differently. We have Prairie Meats in Olivia, Minnesota. That facility was also born out of a need to process cattle from the family's locally raised beef. And in 2017, the family learned of an opportunity to purchase a processing plant. And their strong focus is community-based. They have built relationships with farmers, hunters, and consumers. And they want to continue doing that. So having this newer facility has been helpful to them. They just feel it's really important, to keep that community, and that, people want to know where their meat's coming from. And they serve that demographic really well in their area. And in May of 2020, even though COVID was already impacting a lot of things, they did finish a renovation on a much larger building, and has given them more retail space. They've been able to bring on more staff, and that's just been a win for them. Weiker Acres is up in northern Minnesota. They are a vertically integrated business. They have two entities. They have a farm entity, which is in Carlton, Minnesota, and a meat company that at present is utilizing a commercial kitchen, and that's in Duluth. And each is managed individually. The farm is managed by one couple, and the meat company is managed by a gentleman that we interviewed, Brian Merkel. And he sees that his part was to help Weiker Acres resolve a problem that they were having, which was their raised heritage hogs, and they weren't getting what they should be for the type of meat that they were growing. So he you know, changed kind of how he was advertising their meat, and was able to increase their price because of the quality of what they had to offer, and built a brand based on that model. And they have been successful with that. Weiker Acres Meat Company, knowing that the catering business, as COVID restrictions diminish, will not be a good option for them long haul. So they do have and are in process of building a standalone building for the meat company. And his intention is for it to be a one-stop shop cut and wrap facility, and hopes to bring on other local farmers and give them an option to, you know, bring in their animals for him to process for them. The only aspect that he is not going to do is slaughtering on site, so slaughtering will have to happen elsewhere. But as we can see, everybody was able to make do with what they had and tended to flourish even amidst COVID and a lot of other things. And it's just kind of the people that we talked to and a little bit about their stories. I could have said a whole lot more, but time limited, left it to the stronger points of where they went and how they created a new market amidst of what could have been not a profitable situation. And all of them seem to have forward thinking for an extra strategy, so that, like Christopher brought up, you know, a lot of these businesses aren't looking that direction, but are just like, okay, I want to retire, I'm out of here. And all of these businesses seem to be looking to how can we make it so somebody else will want to take and move forward with it in the future. Thank you. And now it is off to Eliza.
Sure. Thanks, Stu. So for our methodology, we conducted interviews, and they were 45 to an hour long, and that was all over Zoom. And then we had that was purposive sampling. And then these recordings were transcribed and analyzed. We kind of looked for emerging themes in them, which I'll talk about next. And we, as volunteers, worked to write up a final report for, we have a case study for each interview, for each processor. And then in addition to that, we have like a overall kind of themes, and that's all in that one document that Kathy shared earlier in our Zoom that was just published. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to try to breeze through these so that we can have time for questions. And yeah, and Kathy just shared the case studies again. So feel free to follow along with that if you'd like, or look at that later on. So a few of the big findings that we looked at were unprecedented increases in demand, especially because of COVID. I'm sure everyone remembers, you know, the pictures, or maybe you saw it yourself, the shelves at the grocery store that were like sparse with meat. And so these local processors, small and medium size, really got very busy. They're booked out as much as like 2 years in advance, and dealt with that in a variety of ways. They were, you know, started a waiting list or added extra shifts, purchased new equipment, accelerated their expansion plans, or would hire additional employees. I also, one of their key challenges was finding reliable labor force. It was a primary stressor across the board. And those looking to expand were really concerned that they might not be able to find more staff. Some feared losing their existing employees as larger packing plants nearby were putting upward pressure on those local wages, and they were worried that they just wouldn't be able to keep up. They also had difficulty with providing like options for childcare and low industry wages. It's a physically demanding job. Then, and of course, benefits, because a lot of these are small businesses. And this is something I learned through this process is small businesses providing like benefits is a whole thing. And then also a lack of statewide meat cutting training programs were all limiting factors for finding candidates for their open positions in these processing plants. Also, an interesting spin that COVID kind of put on this was that hospitality was really decreased. Like restaurants were all shut down, and so a lot of these processing plants ended up like kind of pivoting their marketing and expanding their like direct to consumer businesses. They offered some variety boxes, shipping across the country, and then building a stronger brand through digital marketing. And finally, there is an acute shortage of slaughtering capacity. A lot of these places were using slaughter if they incorporated slaughter, it was just like so that they could have their product. And it's just like, they can't find people to do this, repetitive and undesirable task. It has a lower profit margin, like slaughter has this lower profit margin than creating that final product of meat. So that was a common theme of a struggle that we found. Next slide. And some emerging business trends that we found, specialization and market segmentation, meaning that when we think of like a small meat cutter, a small town butcher that serve diverse needs in the community, many of these processors actually hoped to develop a specific and scalable business model that would capture a smaller segment of their customer base, kind of a niche market. They would do poultry or livestock, but not both. And many of them actually did find that their current level of inspection was suiting their current needs. Some example plans of kind of this specialization was mobile processing, owner-operator franchise model, partnerships with farm-to-table hospitality vendors, and opening a processing facility as a nonprofit entity. Next, they improved their marketing and brand storytelling. Consumers are really interested in understanding where their meat was raised. And I guess I'm not that old, but I feel like it's become more popular since I've been an adult. Some ambitions were more simple. They would just like want to put a sign up so that people driving through the community would see that there's a retail store. Others were more advanced, like they would want to build a more detailed website, foster partnerships with farms, and make like chef-inspired recipes for these value-added products, and support customer product labeling for their customers. And finally, expansion to a new facility. A few of these places we're talking about expanding. So they acknowledge that automated equipment and additional employees, innovative processes could only really get you so far if your building is too small or it's an aging building. So a few are planning to designing a space that could occupy long-term And additionally, mobile processing is kind of a hot new trend. It seems like a few places are looking into that, and that's a little easier to add capacity logistics wise. You don't need a brick and mortar whole. It's a lot of funding for that, where instead through mobile processing, you could purchase additional trailers. Next slide, please. And I have worked, I'm going to skip to this last point, and then I'm going to hand it back over to Kathy. But we have worked with both Central Lakes College and Ridgewater College, and they are both planning on starting meat cutting technical training programs in the fall, which is an awesome next step that I think this work has helped to inform, and hopefully we've been, it'll be useful for their programs in the future. So we're really excited to continue working with them through that. And then I will pass it over to Kathy.
Thank you, Eliza and Chris and Joan. And I know that we have a couple, I think we have at least one representative from those colleges on as well. And so I first off, I much prefer to give us a little time for questions than to take up any more time talking. We are currently, I just want to let you know, we're also looking at issues of tribal access to meat processing. We're working with Shirley Nordrum, who's our extension, tribal extension person that we are engaging with. We also, a year ago, with support from ORI, AURI, and I saw Michael Sparby was on as well, we were able to look at the halal meat analysis. And so we are going to be trying to do a little bit more work in helping address the meat supply chains for those communities. I think the problem solving among a range of people who are interested in this issue will bring us more strength in addressing this. And if possible, next month, we are looking at trying to get a little more capacity to work on this through a USDA proposal to the small and medium-sized farm area. So just wanted to say that we continue to look at this and look at it through different lenses so that we can start to kind of actually come to the solution point, which I know is important to Farmers Union. And we definitely appreciate like having a group of people who come at this issue from different perspectives is critical. We definitely appreciate the work that went in from the UCAN group. We also received a very small amount of money from the University of Minnesota Sustainable Development Goals to pay the meat processors to take some time to have these interviews. So we were grateful for that as well. And with that, I think, Stu, you probably could moderate some questions if folks have any questions for us.
Absolutely. I see Teresa's hand is up. Teresa, do you want to kick us off?
Yes, thank you, Stu. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Dr. Draeger, thanks so much. And you can, folks, when we thought of these case studies as an idea last summer, I actually didn't envision such kind of a diverse and robust group of case studies. So good work, and I really appreciate it. I would just add, as one of the goals and one of the activities that's underway now, it's a project that I'll just lift it up, that Paul Solosinski, Ted Suss, and Don Arnosti are working on, that would assist in helping those 280, well, the 2/3 of the 280 facilities that face possible closure due to the retirement, that they are looking at a project to try to actually have more of a transitional program for those retiring facilities by helping with workforce development and actually helping place a would-be new plant or new processing facility owner. And I'm just hoping Ted or Paul could give a little more clarity to that as well, because I think that's a key to keeping these facilities open, is actually working with those plant and facility owners to develop their plan for transition, much the same way as we see with family farmers.
I see Paul on my screen. He could say a couple words. Otherwise, I'd be interested too if Chris or the team has any reflections on transition in particular too, while we have y'all. So either, Paul, you unmuted. Do you have anything to say?
Just real briefly, our project is really to kind of take a look at focus on doing an in-depth interview process to ask some of those questions of those small pre-processing owners to actually do that boots on the ground type work to raise that and to see what they raise about what it would take for them for transition, not only onto to another generation or to maybe new owners, but to do that in conjunction with, the Hall Meat Work Group that's been part of this, Sustainable Farming Association, Farmers Union, University of Minnesota, all those factors. Ted Suss, you want to say a comment?
I want to make sure I am unmuted here. Can you hear me, Paul?
Yes, we sure can.
Okay. I had both my phone muted and my computer muted, so I had to make sure I had them both. Paul pretty much covered the part of the project we're focusing on right now. I think the larger aspect of it, though, is to focus on what needs to happen, not just for transition, but for a combination of workforce development in the training on the meat processing as well as the entrepreneurship portion of it. And the interview process is only a phase or a step towards informing the larger solution of the project, which is it more training? Is it more training in entrepreneurship or in meat cutting? Is it financing? And also, what part of the training can be best handled on site through internships and a combination of classroom and internship. But otherwise, Paul covered it very well.
Excellent. Anyone else have a question for the presenters? I'll throw one out actually, and it's kind of a softball, but it'd be interesting to hear y'all reflect. Actually, Alexandria, I'll go to you.
Hi. Yes, thank you for this. I'm curious if you talk to producers at all who do on-farm processing. I just know down in Southeast, especially now that Burt's is closed, I'm hearing a lot more, and even before then, of smaller, younger producers who do a lot of their own poultry on-farm processing. And I'm just curious if this is relevant to this conversation at all and what feedback you might have for us.
Excellent.
Sure, I can take that question. So there's a couple ways to interpret on-farm processing, and I think what we saw touched on multiple angles there. So I think what you're referring to, especially when it comes to poultry, we did see through the Clean Chickens and Company case study, that is an example of, at least in the eyes of the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Health, mobile processing is considered on-farm processing, especially if they are, there's a certain exemption for poultry farmers if they're operating under that exemption where they're not going state inspected or USDA inspected. It is, in the eyes of, again, those organizations, it's on-farm processing, and they're employing the help of a mobile processor. So that mobile processing infrastructure is really a key for helping a lot of those smaller producers take that next step in terms of opening up new sales avenues for their customers. On the livestock side, we saw a little bit more of that with Gunther Farms, and because they're kind of involved in they are on farm processing, and I guess I should say I misspoke because I believe Gunther is still poultry, but they actually built a plant, and they are working both with some of their own, and then they do a little bit of processing for some other farmers as well. So we saw a couple different examples of that, and I think through this larger working group, we've also interacted with more individuals who are looking at that as well. So it's definitely something where there seems to be some growth happening.
Excellent. I think we're right at 12:50. Chris, Eliza, Joan, Kathy, thank you all so much for your fantastic work. Do you have any thoughts to leave us with before we end the recording here and sign off?
I think we're all just thankful for the opportunity to present. And Eliza, go ahead as well.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say thank you all for listening and for all of your support. It's been a fun time.
Fantastic. Well, let's all keep in touch. It's going to be quick here. Y'all should have gotten my email with the presenters CC'd when you registered. So feel free to follow up with me with any general inquiries or anyone CC'd there. Would love to keep in touch with everyone and really appreciate everyone joining today and all your work on this issue. And in particular, Chris and Joan and Kathy and Eliza for all your incredible work. We very much appreciate it. So thank you. Good to see everyone and have a great Monday.
Thanks all. Bye.
Thank you.